a passionate instigator and dynamic problem solver. Dr. Kevin Ross Emery, the host of the Dr. Kevin Radio Show, will be taking you outside the box, behind the curtain, and identifying the load of BS we are fed every day. And now, Dr. Kevin.
Hello, and welcome back to the Dr. Kevin Show. And for those of you who are coming on for the first time, welcome to the Dr. Kevin Show. Here on OMTimes Network, where we're changing the world, wait for it, one ohm at a time. Here today, as always, we'll kick our show off with my hot topic. For those of you who are just joining us, the hot topic is something that makes me feel warm and fuzzy or makes me hot under the collar. Then after we do that, we drag in today's guest. We make him talk about it. We punish him as much as possible. And then we put him to the Dr. Kevin paces. For those of you who are not aware, we are a live call-in show. And if you're listening to this at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Thursday night, it is live, and you may call in. The live call-in number is 202-570-7057. Again, that's 202-570-7057. But if you'd like to join the conversation and you're not one of those kind of call-it-in people, you can go to facebook.com/mydrkevin, MYDRKEVIN. You will come to one of my many fan pages. Make sure you like it. I am a likable guy, believe it or not. And right at the top, you will see about tonight's guest. You'll see how to contact tonight's guest. And there are places where you can leave comments so you can still be part of the conversation. I hear lots of people complain that they don't like what the world is doing. They're worried about this, or they're angry about that, or they're frustrated by something else. But all of those things don't do you any good unless you put them into action. Tonight, we invite you to take the action to call up, share an opinion, ask a question, get a conversation going so that you may be part of the change. Tonight's hot topic, NFL. Now, usually I complain about the NFL because I really question what kind of morals, ethics, and values do we have that we pay some at times less than reputable and certainly positive role models, millions and millions of dollars, when we pay crap to teachers and social workers and other people that are out there actually serving humanity instead of being an oversized child handling a pigskin. I don't know if tonight's guest is a football fan. He may be horrified already, but I haven't heard the click, so I assume not. But tonight I want to talk about the NFL and kneeling. Another round has come out about a peaceful and what I consider respectful protest that was started by Colin Kirkpatrick of kneeling on one knee at the national anthem to say, hey, I feel like we need to be doing more about the racial injustice in this country. They're not burning the flag, though that's constitutionally legal. They're not giving it the finger. They're not making obscene gestures. They're not dancing around the field. They're not doing raspberries. They're very quietly exercising their First Amendment rights, going down on one knee and to make a statement. I happen to have a lot of respect and compassion. My sophomore year of high school, they tried to throw me out of school and suspend me and all sorts of things because I would not say the Pledge of Allegiance. When they asked me why, I said because, it says liberty and justice for all. And I'm willing to say striving for liberty and justice for all, but we don't have liberty and justice for all. I was 15 years old and I had recently finished being the head of my local chapter of the Children's Liberation Organization and knew just how little rights children had in our system. A system that victimized them more than supported them at times. And I was complaining, and this is how I complained. I said, as long as we say we have liberty and justice for all, we will be lazy and not continue to make sure that that actually happens someday. But today is not that day. So again, that was back in 1975. They tried to throw me out of school. They didn't because there was the threat of a lawsuit. But I look at these guys and I say they're doing their respectful constitutional duty. On the other hand, it's become a huge issue because somebody who has people that were part of his presidential campaign that have admitted meeting with foreign countries in order to do something about the election. Now, we don't know if he did or he didn't. I'm not accusing our bully in chief, like I affectionately call him. I only say this because we have his own evidence that he bullies people through Twitter and his comments. He's a bully. But he has people that he's related to, people that were part of. He's not standing up and talking about how horribly un-American they are, that they would accept meetings with people from Saudi Arabia or Russia or some other country to get dirt to try to win a presidential election. No. That doesn't come across his Twitter. But when a respectful protest is done at the NFL to say, I think we have to be more on top of the injustice and race in this country, they are horrible people. So that's my hot topic. I'm going to introduce tonight's guest, and then I'm going to put him on the hot seat and see what he thinks about this. Tonight's guest is Alan Gannett. Alan is the founder and CEO of TrackMaven, a marketing analytics service whose clients have included Microsoft, Marriott, Saks Fifth Avenue, Home Depot, Aetna, Honda, and GE. He has been on the 30 under 30 list for both Inc. and Forbes. He's a contributor for fastcompany.com and has an upcoming book on the creative curve on the disciplined pursuits of creativity coming out in June 2018. Alan, you're coming out. Congratulations from Crown.
Hey, man. Thanks so much for having me.
So, what do you think? Is it even legal for people to say to the football players, you can't do that? What do you think? Weigh in.
So, you're asking the big data guy political and moral questions. So this is definitely not the prognosticator of this stuff. But I'd say my 2 cents as a sort of just member of society is that people can say whatever they want to whoever they want as long as they don't hurt each other. Specifically to this, I tend to think that respectful protests are fine, and I think what you get into a debate about is what is respectful, and I think that's a fair discussion. I think there's obviously things that probably you would say are respectful and aren't respectful, right? You sort of cited giving the middle finger, and I think people probably have different opinions of what is respectful or not, and so I think those are all fair discussions for us to have. I don't think there's a clear red line as to that.
So, Alan, because I'm asking, you're an American citizen, correct? Yes?
Yes.
So I'm asking you as an American citizen, somebody who has a right to an opinion, even if you're a geek. I don't think they've removed geeks' rights. If they have, let me know, please. But would you say quietly sitting, being on one bended knee, but quiet, and in a not in a pose, would you think that would be unrespectful? I mean, does that strike you as unrespectful, or do you think that is?
I tend to think it's on the bubble, leaning on the non-respectful side. I think if you were standing quietly, to me that seems super appropriate and respectful if you don't want to sing or do any of that sort of stuff. I think the knee starts to get into this sort of gray area. I'm not particularly offended by it. I'm also not particularly feel a strong need to defend it. I think, for me, sort of what's on the more clear is that if people were saying that they have to sing or else, I think that would be a problem to me. That would be very clearly, I think, infringement of someone's right. And I think on the other side, I think if, someone was turning their back or giving the middle finger to the flag, I think that would clearly be disrespectful. I think the knee, part of why this discussion is so hard for people is that it is sort of a weird, it's a weird middle ground. It's like, like you're facing it, but you're on your knee, you're quiet, but you're not singing. Like, I don't know. I think the reason why this has become such a topic and hard for people to really grapple with is I think it is honestly a little bit confusing. It isn't clearly good or bad. And I think that's how a lot of America feels. I think you tend to see in radio and the news this very polarized view of this thing. But I think most Americans are just sort of confused. I think the message which is that there are serious problems in our country around race and racial equality is the right message and something that needs to be heard. And I think we're sort of getting, unfortunately, really caught up in the sort of method of communicating that.
Well, and it's very interesting because our media and our government really do their best to keep us polarized because it serves them.
100%. I mean, I think right now we're generally living a time, we see this where we do a lot of big data work in social media, and obviously right now there's all this stuff around Facebook and Twitter and fake news. And I think what you're seeing is that in the age of sort of algorithmic feeds, there is a incentive to create opinions that are very, very, very polarized because that's what does best in these algorithms. That's what gets the most reach, the most impressions. And so these people who are very savvy at internet marketing, they realize that, they know that, and they use that. And so ultimately you have these sort of perverse incentives right now to be very dramatic if you want to have a lot of influence. And so, I think that's something where, there is, I think, a burden of responsibility on the social networks to change and to actually, either self-regulate or be regulated. I think that it is a problem currently. I think, there's a big, I'm a tech guy, but I think there's a big lack of regulation in the technology industry because it sort of grew up out of a very sort of like pseudo-libertarian movement of hackers and people who viewed the internet as a way to sort of escape a lot of sort of traditional institutions and sort of grown up in that culture. And so now you have sort of the descendants of that where we have this. If you think about how big the internet industry is, it is the most under-regulated industry of its size by far. I mean, the lack of regulation on the internet is crazy. Think about the amount of regulation we have on taxi cabs relative to the amount of regulation we have on internet companies. So I'm an internet entrepreneur, but I definitely think we're probably lacking regulation. I think what's currently happening in social media is a sort of downstream effect of that.
Well, one of the things that I would say, is that social media is carrying on what I find as a faintly nauseating torch, but that torch was lit long before social media. I mean, social media has helped put more fuel behind it, but all of the things were in place long before Twitter, Instagram, Facebook lead pages, because our media, as soon as we started having television stations with news channels that were owned or in bed with certain parties or political candidates or points of view, I mean, there used to be a term, yellow journalism, and it was horrible. If you were called a yellow journalist, it was the worst insult in the world. And now we can't find a white journalist, so to speak. A transparent journalist, they don't exist. It's like they're all tinged with yellow with a faint underpinning of green for the lobbyists and the bribes and all the other things that happen. But social media has just ridden a horse that was well ridden before it came along. I'm not saying I don't agree with you that we need more regulation, but I mean, I'd like to see us hold our politicians accountable to stop being so polarizing. I mean, we have politicians out there that come to the point of almost initiating violence when they speak. They've got so polarizing. So I think it's a sad state of affairs, but I will let you off the hook. Go ahead.
I tend to think most people exist within the systems that they are, and they sort of act within the rules and the structures that they exist in. And so right now, I think, when you see politicians act as they do, I think it's an effect of the structures which we society put into place around us. I don't think it's the politicians per se. I think it's the fact that we allow so much money in politics. I think it's the fact that we have, as consumers, we use social media and we use these platforms that drive a lot of polarization. So if you're a politician, your sort of individual incentives are very focused on being as polarizing as possible to get the most fundraising dollars as possible and to get the most attention possible. And so I think if you want to change that, I think you have to step back and change the sort of structures within they exist, because otherwise, as people are very good at acting in their sort of individual interests.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, if you want to make big bucks in social media, you just advertise that you accept rubles, and you know that you're going to have millions of them come in your direction. Alan, So we're going to go to the first question, which you get to run with, which is, where do you want to take my listeners outside the box? You can do it on anything you want. At some point, I want you to do one of my questions on the creative curve, because as an uber creative myself, it's always one of my first loves to talk about. But I tell all my guests, you can talk about whatever you want. So where do you want to take my listeners outside the box? Where do you want to stretch them?
Yeah, I think the thing that I've been really thinking about a lot right now is, I have this book on creativity coming out in a few weeks, and the thing that I find that's really interesting right now in our culture is that we talk so much about creativity as this thing, this sort of mystical, magical thing that some people have or have not, and for some people, creativity is just so easy, and for most of us, it's not. And I think that this is actually an excuse that we tell ourselves. It's a way of getting out of doing the hard work, because the reality is, when you actually look at the science of creativity, and talk about this a lot in the book, you look at the science of creativity is actually clearly a nurturable, learnable skill. There's lots and lots of science that supports this. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of history. But people, when they think about creativity, they tell themselves, well, if it's hard for me, I just must not be good at it. I must not just be a natural talent. So I'm just not going to try. And I think my sort of challenge to people would be that when you actually take a closer look, you find that it wasn't easy for anybody. Mozart's a famous example of a so-called child prodigy. But the reality of Mozart is that when he was 3 years old, his father, who was essentially a helicopter dad, told him that, basically, hey, Mozart, I love you, but, which you should never tell a child, I love you, but you need to become one of the world's greatest musicians. And Mozart was like, what? And he got him the best music teacher in all of Europe and made this little kid practice 3 hours every day, 7 days a week for his entire childhood. And so, of course, by the time he's an adult, he's, pretty good at music because, he's been practicing at that point for 15 years. And so I think we have this notion in Western culture of, this idea, this sort of, godlike talent that's really been sort of embellished and oversold, I think, to us. And I think we have to look past that and realize that, creativity and talent are achievable for all of us. It takes a lot of work.
Well, I think that one of the things is, and I'm going to give you a heads up, because any minute the commercial comes in, I have no control over it. As soon as I start to hear it, I'll be like, and we'll be right back, even if you're in the middle of the sentence, because once it starts, and here it is, they can't hear us. And we'll be right back.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes. Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Tune in to The Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World with me, host Robin Fritz, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. I'll cover personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice, and more, all to help you tap your own intuitive and healing skills. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Mother, Mother Ocean. Hi, I'm Jimmy Buffett. West Indian manatees are one of the most unique animals on Earth, and we're still finding out so many new things about them. But manatees are endangered, and many of them are killed or injured each year because of watercraft collisions or other human activities. You can help save these gentle marine mammals. For free tips on what you can do, call Save the Manatee Club at 1-800-432-JOIN. Thank you.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Dr. Kevin Show here on OMTimes. Remember, we are a live call-in show. We're on today with Alan Gannett. Alan is the founder and CEO of TrackMaven, a marketing analytics service, and he has a new book coming out June 2018 called The Creative Curve. We are a live call-in show, so if you have questions for Alan or myself, you can call in at 202-570-7057. Again, that's 202-570-7057. Or come to facebook.com/MyDrKevin and post your comment there, and we will get it to Alan or we'll get it to our audience and we'll get it answered for you. Alan, I wanted to comment on the creativity that we were talking about at the end of the last segment. One of the things I tell my clients and all the time is, we all have creativity. There's absolutely no such thing as somebody who isn't creative. The thing is we have a very limited way of defining creativity. You can be a creative problem solver, and it's creative. You can be...
You nailed it. So when you look at the science around creativity, what they find is that there's actually no correlation above a relatively average IQ. Above a relatively average IQ, everyone, it turns out, has the same creative potential. You don't have to be an IQ genius to be a creative genius. We all have the same creative potential. It's what we actually do with it. And that's where it really comes down to how you were raised, the people around you, the actions you took. And I think we sometimes mistake that, and we assume that just because now we're 30 and we've never achieved something creatively great, it means we're never going to, or it's impossible. And we really restrict ourselves in what we think we can do.
Well, and I agree. I think that, our biggest enemy is when they say it's all in your head, and that's the worst place it can be, is how you look at it, and again, how you define it. And now some people are going to be more naturally athletically inclined. They just were born to run. They have a body type for it. I think that there are some people whose brains may make them be in the more obvious of what we see as creativity. And again, we miss all of the subtle ways in which everyone is creative in some way, shape, or format. But you also have to put energy in it. And you're giving the key word here, which is disciplined pursuit of creativity.
Yeah, and the thing I'd say, and I think I think there's some nuance there, is that one is that oftentimes we mistake natural born talent for just an early start. So let me give you an example. If, let's say, you had an 11-year-old daughter and she goes to her first track meet ever and she's 11, she's an amazing sprinter. You may go, well, wow, she's really great. But what scientists find is when you actually often look back at some of these quote-unquote child prodigies, you often find a different story. You often find something else, like, the dad really liked baseball, and so he would always play baseball with her in the backyard since she was 5. So since she was 5, she was sprinting around the backyard, essentially running track without even realizing. And so by the time she was 12, she had 6 years of experience at this. And so you often find that these stories we have of sort of natural or prodigal talent are often oversold and overhyped. And the reality is, when you actually look at it, the brain has this amazing ability to change and adapt. They've done these studies where this is all around the studies of neurogenesis, which is basically how your brain generates new brain cells and how your brain, actually the structure of your brain changes over time based on the skills that it does. So they did this fascinating study where they compared cab drivers to bus drivers. This was all pre-Uber, and they compared cab drivers to bus drivers. And what was interesting is that cab drivers are constantly trying to navigate new routes. They're constantly navigating a city using their visual spatial memory, trying to figure out how to get somewhere. Bus drivers drive the same route every single day. And what they found is that taxi drivers, the longer they've driven a taxi for, the part of their brain that's tied to visual spatial memory gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the things we actually do can actually change our brain. Our brain is much more of a muscle than we realize. You can actually change and adapt and learn these skills. And so over time, these can lead to huge differences in ability, the sort of idea of compounding or compounding advantage. And so I think for a lot of us, we sort of mistake this and we go, wow, that person's so good with it. They were born that way. And yeah, there's obviously things like you should be tall if you want to play basketball. But most things people are actually pretty good at getting good at. It just may take a long time.
Well, and again, it's that little bit of an edge And it's always a combination of, you know, the natural genetics and the environment that those genetics are being raised in and what's being praised, like, or what's being focused upon. I mean,
Exactly. I mean, a lot of little kids, finger paint, but some parents tell them, even though it sucks, that it's great. And all of a sudden, little Johnny loves the positive feedback. And then, fast forward 5 years and, he's still painting because early on as a little kid, he was told that, this is what, gets you love and affirmation.
I do believe that there is always some predispositions about how that creativity may play out versus somebody that may have more manual dexterity, may be drawn more to written art, somebody who has a facility for words. I mean, I have a show called Dragons, Unicorns, and Other Creative Creatures, and it's a weekly TV show that does nothing but promote and support the arts and artists. And I've seen a ton of them come through my TV show, doing all sorts of different kinds of arts and things that sometimes people don't even consider as artistic until you really talk about it or you really think about what that is and what's going on there. Now, a lot of people would not associate somebody who identifies themselves as, I think, what would you said in the first segment, as about being kind of a geek or of some kind. That wasn't exactly how you put it, but I was asking you about social and moral questions, and you said it was basically it was a stretch. What led you to want to do this big, huge study on creativity? What was your driving force for it?
Yeah, so my day job is I run a company that looks at the data behind marketing and sort of applies a reason and rationality to why certain campaigns and certain brands take off, and we help inform our clients using that around what you should do differently. And the thing that I find is interesting is so much of life we view as very organic and nebulous, whether that's brands or campaigns or marketing, but also things like creativity. And in fact, there's a lot of science behind these things, a lot of patterns behind these things. For example, in creativity, there's actually all these amazing foundational studies around consumer taste and preference and what drives certain things to take off and become hits and other things to flop and fail. And so I've just generally been someone who, I'm from New Jersey. I get kind of frustrated, and so I generally get frustrated when people limit themselves because they say things like, well, I'm just not creative. I'm just not that person. And the reality is that we actually at this point have decades of really great research on creativity and consumer preference and how to really generate ideas that scale and sell and, resonate with people. And so for me, I just think I have I really get annoyed when people limit themselves. I don't want people to live these sort of depressed versions of themselves just because they have some false facts.
Well, I think there's a lot of them out there. And speaking of false facts, this may be in your research something you came across or not. But it's been commonly thought that you reach the peak of your IQ in your early 20s. And something that you were saying about the taxi cab driver versus the bus driver reminded me of a piece of information I came across a few years ago, which is that actually our IQ can go up, and in fact will go up if we will challenge our brain with diversity. Our IQ goes down, stays the same or goes down if the majority, a high percentage of our life is on autopilot, because the brain gets lazy. And that we can actually keep a young brain till the day we die if we're always challenging our brain to do different things, because it continues to create new neural pathways. I don't know if that's something.
Correct. There's a section of the book about neurogenesis, and basically what they found is that your brain, your entire life, every single day is creating new brain cells, and very much like a muscle, it literally goes to whatever part of your brain is most active and sort of latches on there. And what's interesting they found is that these new brain cells, if you're not doing very much, they just die off. If they don't feel like they're needed or being used, they'll just sort of eventually fade away, and you actually don't get that benefit. And so, they've done these studies, for example, with senior citizens where they'll have them do these sort of word exercises and these different things that are basically mental exercises. The idea of basically sort of working out the brain, and they find that they can actually 10 years later look back and see that the structural changes caused by those exercises persisted 10 years later. And so we as people, obviously just because our brain, it's our consciousness, all this stuff, we sort of underestimate our brain's ability to change and morph with us. And, that's a real sort of failing for a lot of us, because then we put this limit on ourselves. It doesn't have to be there. You can do things that you don't think you can do. There are things that you are terrible at right now that with enough thoughtful hard work, not just hard work, but thoughtful hard work, you can be great at.
And I would agree with that. That certainly is something that I have found in working with people over the last, close to 30 years now, is that, people will live up to or down to the expectations they set for themselves if they're willing to have the discipline to do it. So again, now what are you doing? Now, this is supposed to be my segment where I ask you to take my listeners behind the curtain, but you're kind of doing it. So I'm not even feeling like I need to ask the question, because you're kind of just doing it with your discussion. But, exposing people to things that have not been correctly, presented to us, maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally. So what do you do to make sure your brain is expanding and growing? What are the things you do?
For me, I think it's about really finding new challenges and reminding myself and having the mindset that something that's a challenge today, next month is a passion, the year after that's a talent, right? And some things that can be really hard today, those are actually the things that are most worth doing. And I think too often we can limit ourselves by things that we're naturally good at. And for me, I really try and force myself to do that. And the ways I do that are very practical. So on one side, it's just about, reframing to myself what I'm doing and how I'm spending my time. On the other side, it's about surrounding myself with people who are going to push me, right? I want that friendly competition. I don't want my friends just to be people who I have shared experiences with from long ago and I'm constantly living in the past. No, I also want to have friends who are in the present, who are creating, who are pushing, who are doing new things, who push me through competition to want to do more and be better and achieve more. And I think who you surround yourself with has a huge impact on how much you decide to strive in life. I don't mean strive necessarily in a career way, because I think that can often be very shallow, but I mean strive in a sense of personal self-development.
Okay, so I'm going to challenge you here for a second, because I like challenging. And in fact, anybody that knows me will tell you I'm a very challenging person. Which is, does it have to be a competition? Is competition...
Does what have to be a competition?
The challenge. Does the challenge have to be a competition?
I think no. I mean, a competition isn't necessarily a bad thing. Right. I think the difference between friendly competition and competition is that competition is a zero-sum equation. Friendly competition is the sort of motivation you have from seeing other people achieve things and you wanting to also be able to achieve those things, improve those things to yourself, not out of spite or out of an urge to hurt another person, but simply to prove to yourself that you can do things. And so, I don't know if I don't necessarily see competition as a negative concept.
Well, I don't think competition, I have a tendency, Alan, to look at things, a lot of things, as neither positive nor negative. It's the energy in which they're applied with. So competition can be positive and it can be negative. But definitely Correct. There are some people that even hearing the word competition, especially depending on how they were brought up, where they came from, whatever it is, a lot of different factors, would immediately get turned away because competition has never been portrayed as anything but I'm going to beat you and prove I'm better than you, because that's a lot of energy that certain kinds of competition really foster. It's about who's the better person versus internal competition of how do I become my best person. And it has nothing to do with you, but I can challenge you by saying, you show me something. Of course, now I'm speaking because I've been a teacher for years as well. And I go, Alan, that's the best you got. What about this? What about that? What about that? That's some lazy thinking there, Alan. Come on, I expect better of you. What happened? Did you not get enough sleep last night? That there's no competition in any of those comments, except for a competition with yourself. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of semantics. I mean, you can call friendly competition inspiration, right? I think it's the same thing. I don't mean competition in a cut the other person down sense of it. I don't think that's healthy or useful. And I think, oftentimes we unfortunately, don't surround ourselves with people who motivate us to do more and be more. And I think that's just really important. I think people need to realize that, if you spend all of your life with other people who, aren't pushing and aren't pushing you, like, it's very hard to motivate yourself completely in a vacuum.
I always remember in my first really serious committed relationship, we had a ceremony and everything because she couldn't get married back then because it was another male. And we reached a point where things were going bad. And he said to me, don't you ever stop pushing. I feel like you're always pushing me to be better. And he said, what happens if I want to just stay where I'm at? What happens if I'm just happy? What happens if I ever want to stay here? And I said, then the marriage is over because I can't be with a dead person because that's a dead person.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes with ambition, I think where people get confused is ambition doesn't have to be ambition to a specific goal or endpoint, right? I think ambition is about making the journey better, more fulfilling, more impactful, more satisfying. I think that's the type of ambition that we want to have as a society. That's the ambition that's healthy. That's the ambition that drives forward progress. And I think oftentimes those two things get confused both in good and bad ways. I think there's people who are very successful who are overly ambitious because they're constantly seeking to achieve new and higher goals, but they're never finding satisfaction from those. And then I think there's other people who, sort of see that and they say, well, that's an anathema to me, but I'm going to be happy and satisfied today, but I'm never going to push myself to be better along the journey.
Yeah, well, I do think that's it. I mean, we are going to be going to our break, but I think it's very important to always have the question be, am I being my best me?
100%.
And we'll be right back with Alan Gannett.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, I'm Kelly Fox, host and astrologer of The Astrology Show. Each week, I'll give you access to the current transits, which are a valuable tool that provide astrological information to help unlock the potential each of us has. Understanding the stars can help steer us in the right direction to make better informed choices. So if you're wondering what's going to happen in your week ahead, be sure to tune in to The Astrology Show for guidance. Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
This is why you work so hard to pay the mortgage. Because home is more than four walls and a roof. It's that porch swing on a summer evening. It's everybody over for Sunday dinner. And your family sleeping in their own beds at night. Making Home Affordable is a free government resource that can make paying the mortgage easier. Call 888-995-HOPE or visit makinghomeaffordable.gov.
Good night, Mama.
This is why. Brought to you by the U.S. Treasury, HUD, and the Ad Council.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Dr. Kevin Show. And we are on today with Alan Gannett. Alan is the founder of TrackMaven. He has a new book coming out in June. Do we have an exact date in June, Alan?
June 12th.
June 12th. On June 12th, you're going to be able to find the book called The Creative Curve. So, Alan, and this is the last segment of the Dr. Kevin Show. This is the segment when I say to the guest, what load of crap that is going on in the world today do you want to talk about? Do you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think right now, the thing we're seeing more than ever is that I think we're missing the entire boat when it comes to higher education. And you're seeing a world where technology is automating more jobs, including white-collar jobs than ever before. AI is meaning that even more professional jobs are being automated, yet the higher education system is stuck in the past in terms of how it teaches new skills, in terms of the amount of debt it puts on people. And this is where one of the elements for me around creativity is that I think the jobs that are going to be the slowest to be automated, the slowest to be replaced by AI, those are the jobs that are ultimately the creative jobs, the creative careers. And, too often I think the colleges right now are sort of telling people a lie, which is, hey, get your accounting degree, get your degree of a thing that can literally be automated by a machine in the next 10 years, and you'll be okay. And I think we're selling people short right now, and I think that's a real problem.
Well, and it's very interesting because I agree. I think that there's a lot of problems with public education, and I think it starts way before college. But there are two cities right now that are actively being studied and putting things in place to try to do job retraining for jobs that are going to go away in the next 10 years because they're so heavily job oriented. One was Phoenix, and the other one was I think it was Indianapolis. I just read it like the last 24 hours, but I need to go back and read it more. I just glanced. I thought it was kind of fascinating that even though the federal government isn't necessarily doing anything, nor am I sure that it's the federal government's job. I think the federal government has overreached in several areas. But that these towns, these cities, are realizing that they're going to have a large jobless population. And if they don't start doing something now, in 10 years, that population will cripple the city. So, in a way, supporting what you're saying. Have you heard of this?
I haven't heard of that specifically, but I think there are people who are thinking about the future, who are thinking about a world where so many of the professional jobs we see today are automated. And I think there are people tackling these issues and these problems, but ultimately I think the problem is that we're hard to see change, right? We don't want to believe that change is happening, and I think it's scary when that change is really big. And right now the really big change is that you may have a bachelor's degree, but 10, 15, 20 years from now, that might not matter at all, right? The amount of automation that's going to be happening is going to be cataclysmic. I mean, you look at, for example, the legal industry and the amount of paralegal jobs that are being, taken away by AI and e-discovery tools and all sorts of stuff. And that's just the reality. There's nothing that'll stop it. There's no incentive for it to stop. And, I think the thing we have to know is that we have to change how we educate people, how we train people, how we, tell people what's in their future. We can't sell people a bad bill of goods.
Well, and I think that there's you have to look at, can we create a world? And I recently had put on an expo, and we had about 100 vendors. It was 2 days. We had over 30 presenters. And one of my sponsors came in from Europe that was sponsoring, who's trying to break into the U.S. In their marketplace. And so they sponsored my expo. And him and I had a lot of interesting conversations, and he lives in Finland. And, of course, the culture is very different in Europe. I don't know if you've spent much time in Europe, but the way that they kind of look and see and do things. And over there, there's a belief system among the 20-somethings, in the late 20-somethings, that, in 10 years, we're going to have a world where so much is automated that everybody's going to have more free time and will have more ability to explore their creativity, their hobbies, their to do things. Where over here we look at it as another social burden. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think that the amount of automation will mean we have more time for hobbies. I think as people, we're too focused on striving and personal achievement. We're just wired that way. And so I think, as more things are automated, I think there'll be a somewhat violent shift over to people, having to learn more creative fields. You're already starting to see that with the amount of people who are going through things like, developer boot camps and learning how to be, code apps and this kind of thing. But I think what you're going to see is this massive shift where ultimately, the role of humans is to use the things that we as humans uniquely have, which is creativity, which is our judgment, which is our ability to connect, divergent things together in unique and interesting ways. And that's the thing that machines will struggle with for the longest period of time. And so, that's where I think ultimately we're going to go. And I think that's a really good thing, as long as a society we're prepared to spend the money, spend the resources to get people there, and also support the fact that some people aren't going to be able to get there because of their age or their life or their situation, and we have to be prepared from a public policy perspective to handle that. And so, I don't believe that what's going to happen. I think it was Denmark did an experiment recently with universal basic income, and it failed. They closed it early because I think the issue ultimately is that, people want to work, they want to do things, they want to create, and, they want to, up-level their lives. We don't want to stay static. Most people do have a growth mindset.
Well, and it was actually Finland, because the guy that came over lives in Finland. Yeah, it was Finland, because we discussed that. We discussed that basic, they wanted to make sure that everybody had a basic that would it lower crime and would it lessen poverty if everybody had at least just enough to live on? Not enough for luxuries. They would still have to work for those, but that nobody would be starving. Nobody would be homeless, which is kind of interesting. But we have created generations of very entitled people. And I'm not going to say it's the majority, but it's a significant percentage at this point. Significant is whenever you get over 10, 15% of people that are basically raised in an environment that said, well, why should you work if the social system is going to support you? Just have another baby.
Where do you see that? I don't see that. I mean, I think you see you see that productivity, people are working more hours than ever before. I don't see there's lots of people who are, just hanging out.
Oh, then you haven't looked at the welfare numbers and the food stamp numbers, and you haven't looked at the mentality.
No. I think, you look at, labor participation, they show that chart of it going down. If you look at the scale, it's gone down from 68% to 66%. Like, this isn't like this isn't a crazy change. I just tend to think that, there's very few people who really want to spend their lives living a sort of subsistence life. TAMF and a lot of these programs in the United States that provide temporary assistance to people, you're talking a few $100s a month. We're not talking, people are taking $3,000 checks and calling it a day. This is very, very meager amounts of money.
No, but there are definitely whole cultural pockets that are very disenfranchised and very, are basically trained that they're not going to get ahead, that they're not going to get, they're.
Oh, I agree. I agree that there's people who the game is stacked against them, and they know that. But I don't think that's them saying like, well, I just don't want to work. I think it's them feeling like everything's stacked against them. They don't have a chance. I think those are two very different things.
Well, and I think some of it is a kind of depression. I do think that if you're brought up in a place, and there has been a lot of research done on, that certain socioeconomical groups, they don't eat as well, their children don't get fed as well, there are less nutrients early in childhood, their IQs are negatively impacted, that we do have a that you can definitely tell the difference that somebody who is raised with a good, healthy diet, with a semi-full-time adult in the presence, is going to do more, is going to have more self-worth, going to have more self-esteem, and actually has more IQ. Because if there's not enough nutrients in childhood, the brain doesn't develop as well.
Definitely.
And we still have pockets in this country of malnutrition, not malnutritious children. Well, we have some of it because people are trained to eat junk. It's the cheapest food. It's the easiest. It's what's most affordable. But also that media makes it look the most desirable.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing the amount of marketing that goes into food and the sort of R&D that goes into food to make people want it more. I mean, you look at how salt and sugar tend to balance each other out. So it's weird that so much food has so much salt and sugar until you realize that makes it pretty compelling.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've done I do work with children and families and stuff like that as part of the work I've done through the years, because you may not have any awareness. I have several books out on ADD and ADHD. So I have been dragged more and more into that field to look and study and see what's going on and what's the difference in things like this. So, Alan, you are a marketing analytics service. If there was one thing besides more regulation that you think would turn this more from being at times a curse, with the bullying, with the polarization, with all of the negatives that come out, what would be the one thing that you would change if you could wave a magic wand in the way that social media marketing and internet marketing is done, besides regulation?
Yeah, I think
we got that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think if I could wave a magic wand, it would really about changing how these feeds work, and moving away from some of these algorithmic models and back to either more basic algorithms that are transparent, so people understand sort of what are the things going into them, or just going back to chronological feeds where every person in your network, you see all of their updates, and if you don't care about it, you just scroll past. I mean, I think ultimately, there's such a thing as being too efficient. It's sort of the high-frequency trading in Wall Street. It's almost so efficient that it leads to these flash crashes because the algorithms can sort of stack on top of each other and lead to these crazy, unexpected results.
Okay. So, well, I do think that there is also there is definitely some manipulation that's involved in analytics. And I think that as that comes more to the forefront, people are getting, more leery than ever of, not only what they're seeing, but what they're not seeing, and then what can they believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are right to be skeptical, and they're right to take a second look and think about what they're seeing, because it's a weird world out there, and we're living in a time when technology has amazing promise, but it also has some amazing negative effects too that I think we're just as a society starting to really grapple with for the first time.
Yeah, it definitely has a dark side, as all things do. There's no such thing
and
as
I think,
anything
but technology, what's so fascinating is that I think for a long time we sort of viewed technology, especially in the internet age, as a pure positive. Like, look at all these amazing things we could do on the internet. And I think it's interesting to see us finally sort of come to grips with the fact that, whoa, this thing that's connected us and completely changed how we operate in society. I mean, I'm in my office right now looking out on my company's floor, and every single desk has a computer, and people spend their entire days in front of a computer. And this thing that has completely changed how we live and work also has real negative repercussions on us.
Now, I know you were in the 30 under 30, but I don't know when that was. How old are you now, Alan?
I'm 12. No, I'm 27.
You're 20. If you're 12, then you and I could be really good friends because we're probably about the same age, at least from that standpoint. Do you have any children
worries.
yet?
I'm emotionally 6. No, I don't. I don't have any children.
Do you see yourself as this? Would you want to bring children into this world?
100%. I mean, I think ultimately, as a society, every time there's been big shifts, we've had problems, right? You look at the industrial age and sort of the negative labor practices that emerge and the environmental things. And, eventually we, as a culture, recognized those and took actions on those and improved those. And, obviously things aren't perfect, but we are as a society, I think, moving along a long upward trend towards justice and betterness. And I think, I'd love for my kids to be part of that and hopefully have a positive impact on that.
So at what age would you put your child on a computer as things stand now? When would you put that iPad or iPhone in their hands?
I think iPad, probably double digits, 10. I think computer even later. I think, Steve Jobs had a no iPad rule at home, which I think is telling. But yeah, I think kids are being exposed to technology too early, just because so much of how these various applications and games are built are meant, they're wired to create sort of addictive behaviors. And I think that's another aspect of society where I think 10 years from now we're going to look back and view a lot of these sort of game designs in the same negative way we view cigarette smoking, for example. And I think we're going to be much more conscious of this, and we're going to take a much more critical perspective, both from a moral and societal aspect, but also probably from a policy and legal aspect, because, I think there's a real case to be made that it's not okay to design a video game that's meant to make people addicted. And I think that's fair.
So I want to thank Alan Gannett of TrackMaven to come on. If you want to follow up with Alan, you can do so. I'm looking for your website. The only website I have was fastcompany.com that came across. But you can find out more about Alan. He has got a book called The Creative Curve on the Disciplined Pursuit of Creativity, coming out in June 2018. And you can come to facebook.com/MyDrKevin and have links to contact Alan there. Alan, thank you for coming.
Bye.
Bye. Y'all come back now. You hear?